I'm really uplifted and inspired by that. And I want to jump right in with our next guest, Adam Apollo. He's an incredible galactic powerhouse. Adam, are you with us?
Hey there. Good to see you,
Hey.
Michelle.
Wow, I love your background. Thank you. You're from Command Central, Galactic Federation of Light, right here in the house.
It's one of the easiest ways to see what's happening on the planet. Got to have
Yeah.
that planetary dashboard.
I really love that. It's given, full vision right there where you can look through the lens of seeing it all right before us. And I really want to jump right in since we're trying to get back on schedule, and I want to let people know that you and I spent some time yesterday talking because we are good friends, and I just want to get across you have your fingers in so many pies. You've been one of the things that I loved that you did was way back in 2005 and 2006 when you coordinated the prayer runs for world peace with
Mhm.
the indigenous elders and the youth from around the world, from around the North American continent. And you've also been involved with the White House with speaking on future technology and unified and with the United Nations. But what I really wanted to kind of hone in on today was where we're at, kind of like a check-in with our galactic families, maybe give an overview of our galactic history and how each one of us can identify with our star family and really activate those traits within us, and then go into our vision for what we're co-creating right now. We're seeing a lot of disruption in the field, and how we exercise that discernment meter inside each one of us and really
Oh
activate that.
yeah.
I know that you can shed some light on that. So you
Sure.
can take it
Sure.
away wherever you want to start.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, well, I spent a good bit of time working with White House aides and a lot of young philanthropists around the world back during the Obama administration. I imagine that if I was, asked to do the same now, I don't know if I would. But certainly the United Nations and the sort of planetary collective of people who are dedicated to seeing us come together and make a world that is more equitable for all, that is environmentally balanced, that is conscious of our impact on all life around us, that is holding a role of stewardship for everyone to get what they need to survive and thrive and create a beautiful planet. That's the alliance that I work with these days. That's the people that I work with. I'm less concerned about working with people that are overly concerned with their nation state or their sports team or their particular brand of the flag, so to speak, and more those that are really here holding the flag for a unified and interconnected planet Earth, and one that is coming into peace. And so, it's a major, this is a really important entry point to talk about our relationship with other worlds, because if we don't understand that acceptance of each other and an acknowledgement of each other, and actually, growing up past our kind of like young, 12-year-old fight on the playground kind of vibe with each other, where we're all trying to one up each other and be better than the other person, as long as we're in that zone, we're not going to have world peace. We're not going to have global community. We're not going to have deep, planetary interconnection. But if we can actually learn to acknowledge each other and realize that most of the conflict that we create in our lives stems from trauma that we have not yet accepted. Most of the things that we attack others for are shadows that we have not yet integrated, right? And when you start looking at the world that way, you start to see that, some people that you think of, are supposed to be leaders are actually not leaders at all. They're just completely traumatized people that have not yet dealt with their own inner work. They've not done it. They haven't faced the shadow. They can't see their own pain and they can't see their own hurt. So they absolutely are not in a position to lead us out of a place where we're acting collectively out of that trauma, creating more pain and more conflict with others, right? So why look to the stars? Why look to the galaxy? Why look to the galactic family out there? Well, let me tell you, there's one really, really crucial reason related to this, which is that in my experience of these beings from other worlds nearby and throughout this galaxy, what I've experienced in connecting and communicating with them and exploring with them, whether that's been through, calling in starships and having telepathic communications with beings on ships, or as my, personal, like actual physical contact experience that happened back in 2005, which I talk about on my show on Gaia with Ruben Langdon, interviews with Ed, and tell that whole story if any of you guys want to hear that one. It's a long and deep one, so we won't go into it here. But whether through that or through my experiences after that, or communion with this Galactic Council of Species, 73 different species that I met around the galaxy, what I found is this incredibly deep commitment to conscious evolution. This state of being where they're no longer working out how their planetary group or their particular species can have more resources or be more empowered or outwit or outsmart the other species. Because most of those species all operate in a completely open source format. And what that means is, like, if I develop an innovation on my world, I come up with a great idea that solves lots of problems. The first thing I'm going to do is share that insight with everyone everywhere else. You can think of it as like updating the software for the galactic network. And now everybody has access to the more advanced software. So everybody gets lifted up at the same time. When we see on this planet, a lot of that happening in the technology space. The more there are technology-oriented developers and builders who are deciding to operate in this format of open source. I want to share these gifts. I want to create a platform that's open to everybody. I want to enable others to benefit from the insights that I've had. The growth, the acceleration, the innovation, all of these things explode the more open source sharing there is.
Couldn't agree
it's
more.
just a totally different approach than how much secrets can I keep and how much money can I make because of my secrets in order to beat the competition, right?
I do feel there's a common thread happening throughout this whole summit of people talking about conscious collaboration and how, if we truly want our species to survive and thrive, we've got to all come together, even though we're different. We don't want to be robots. We free expression and honoring the divine in each one of us, and seeing more and more people come together for the greater good for all. You're hearing that more and more and more. People, if they're getting a message, instead of keeping it to themselves so they can make money off of it or so their ego thrives or any of that, to share it because it is universal knowledge. And that feels to me what will get us through this narrow pathway we found ourselves in, once we open ourselves up to intergalactic peace. But in order to have intergalactic peace, we have to find peace within ourselves first, and then, stream that out to our communities and to the world. And so I really feel like after speaking with you yesterday on the phone, I really was tingly for the rest of the night, feeling that you definitely have a strong message to share about unity and about visioning where we want to go. And also, reminding us of how we can tune into our own intuition from our galactic source, who give us an idea of what we're working with here in order to visualize what we want to see on Earth.
Yeah. Well, one of the big shifts in thinking that I think it's valuable for a lot of people to make is just like in that meditation, you're working up and down your chakras, you're working with different layers, and you're doing that in order to create and move energy in different ways and in different operations. Well, when we look at the galaxy and we look at the species out there, there's this very common kind of conception that all of these beings are like higher dimensional. They're not vibrating in the same way on the same plane. They're not visible in the same way in the physical, that they're more like spirits, right? In the way that we would interpret, like if you have an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent that passes away and then you're communing with that grandparent, they may come into your space and you may feel them, you may have an interaction with them. But that's a very different thing than when, your housemate walks into your space, or your husband or wife or your partner or whoever it is, right? There's a different level of interaction that occurs on the physical. And there's also a different level of concerns that you deal with, right? So if I'm talking with my grandma or grandfather who passed away, like I'm going to be more interested in the conversation that just has to do with like where his soul is at and like the guidance he has to offer around like my life and my living and my being, right? Now, if I'm talking to a species from another world, like, let's just really get this straight. I'm talking about a species on another world, right? So there's a physical planet around a physical star that has a being that's evolved on that planet and has gone through a journey of growth and evolution and learning how to work with that planet, right? And so by my communion with a being that has been living and growing and evolving on a planet and developed the ability to actually steward that planet going into the future, and then travel between worlds and connect with other planets and develop the technology to do this, the technology to have unlimited resources as they need to travel to different worlds, superluminal technology to jump across the galaxy so they don't have to take, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of years to travel because they're not limited by the light speed barrier. There is very specific contextual assistance that we can get from species like that can help us understand exactly where we're at right now. Because in this world, we're in the process of going to the stars, right? We're launching rockets into space, although we're still, as I like to call it, pushing pencils through the fabric, right? So we're basically taking giant bombs, lighting the fuse, and then we're riding the explosion of the bomb to push our way, trying to accelerate through the atmosphere and into space. Whereas, a lot of these other species out there, what they've figured out is that pushing through space-time is not the best way to travel. The best way to travel is to create an envelope around your craft that separates the internal space-time from the external space-time, allowing you to sort of slipstream through the fabric, jump to different locations rather than traveling through all the space in between, which creates all kinds of problems, time dilation and et cetera. So if we start opening ourselves up to what is it that these beings have to teach us, each of these different species have different gifts to show us. For example, if there's life in the Sirian star system, there's 2 suns in that system. And the planet in that system is then thus, because of its positioning between those stars, going to have daylight most of the time for most of the year, except for one portion of the year when the 2 stars are kind of on the same side of the planet. So they're both on the other end. Then you're going to have day and night. But the rest of the year, just kind of like as we have summer and winter, and there's more sun in the summer than there is in the winter, if you're in the northern hemisphere, or the opposite in the southern hemisphere, then basically for them, you can think of it as, well, when it's summertime, there's actually sun in the daytime and there's sun at the nighttime, right? And so there's a key to this, which is about understanding how to deal with light, right? And understanding that light is this really important thing you have to learn how to operate with in order to be a living being on a planet and develop certain kinds of technologies and do these kinds of things. And there's also a reason why, those who have memories or connections with the Sirian star system feel like they lived in these massive tree cities and they have all these elven characteristics, because On a world where you get sun most of the time, most of the year, trees are going to be the most successful organism, right? So you have massive, massive trees because they're just constantly absorbing that sunlight and turning it into energy. And it also protects other life forms because trees can protect other kinds of beings from the intense solar radiation and the heat and the light that's coming in all the time. And so as a species, the Sirians developed this capacity to work with light frequency and to develop the ability to bend light, to work with light, and to use light in order to interact with space-time itself. Because when you really get down to the quantum mechanics of it and the actual structure of space-time itself, it's all just light. Everything's just made of light. All we're dealing with is this beautiful light lattice that is composing the universe itself. And really everything, all of empty space is full of this lattice of light, and gravity is just when that lattice of light is flowing or moving because it's in curvature. So right now you're experiencing yourself being pulled down towards the center of the earth. And that's literally because space-time has gotten curved so much around the core of the earth that it's causing an inward flow of that light lattice that you feel every time you relax your arm and you stick it out, right? And so for them, it's like learning, oh, that's interesting. So if it's just space-time flowing in one direction, if we change the way that light around my ship or around myself or whatever is interacting with that flow, I can change the way that that flow is operating on my mass and my matter. I could create a field where that mass or matter is not as susceptible to that flow of space-time and thus is free from that field of gravitation, right? So that's like a huge insight for the Sirians, and one that opens up to like jumping to other star systems and et cetera. And it can teach us a lot about thinking about developing new kinds of transportation here on this planet.
Wow. That's just such a small, teeny little piece. We're just focusing on the Sirians right there. That is just infinitesimal little piece. I do see some questions coming in for you. And
sure.
Before we go on to some of the other things, I wanted to ask this question. Andrea Murphy asked, has Adam been given an indication when mass disclosure of these other species will take place and what that could look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the best ways to approach this that I think will help you understand why I'm giving you the answer that I'm giving you is to look at the standpoint of what's happening on Earth from the standpoint of being a galactic being, right? Mm-hmm. So you've already evolved your planet, you've already balanced your ecosystem, you're already traveling to other worlds, you have communion with other worlds, and you come across this planet with this species that's, frankly, still weaponizing itself all over the place, and you have small wars going on all over the place, plus all these like energetic battles and conflicts. You have leadership that's completely incompetent in a lot of different areas of the world. And then you've got a ton of people who are like, hey guys, we're ready. Like, let's get, like, come on, like, help us out here. This is a serious mess. And this pattern of control systems on this planet are totally due to be expired. Can you help us out? And so they're like, all right, look, we've come down to Earth a few times before, right? And when we come down and we really interact with humans, the problem in the past is that you guys just treat us like gods, right? And you worship us like gods. And that's not going to work going forward, because if you worship us like gods, then we're not going to be able to be equals on a galactic stage. And we actually want you guys to go through this initiation in these intense teenage years, right? Mm-hmm. And actually come into adulthood through your own growth and self-development, because then you're going to meet us as adults and as equals. This is your big initiation. Right. And so they're like, all right, we're not going to let you blow yourselves up. So don't worry about the nuclear weapons thing. Like, we'll show you, we'll shut them down. We'll do a bunch of shutdowns on a bunch of tests just to freak out all your generals. So they end up on Larry King Live and they're like, yeah, there was a ship and it flew around my rocket and I just saw the dang thing shoot a bunch of lasers and the whole thing came apart. And, you know, and so that people can feel a little bit more safety around that. Like there's this support, there's this backup. We're going to leave a bunch of geometric, amazing imprints, you know, on fields all over your planet, so that as you're getting downloads and as you're sketching and drawing and you're thinking about these new levels of technology and connection, we're there to confirm. We're like, yeah, check this out. That's exactly what we're saying. You're on the right track. You know, it's a nudge in the right direction. And we're going to show up and talk to you anytime you want, whenever you develop your capacities to communicate telepathically, because you're going to need that communication system in order to participate as part of this galactic community, because we don't use phones to talk between worlds. You can't send a signal, you know, through the phone line and beam it and expect it, you know, to get to a star system that's 4 light years away, or 400 light years away if it's the Pleiades, you know, in less than 400 years. So you have to use your telepathic capacities and you have to really develop those. So anytime you show up for that kind of conversation, we're down for it. But you're going to have to take these hints, take these downloads, take the work that you've been doing on this world, you know, integrate yourselves. Those of you that traveled to Earth back in Lemuria or Atlantis and have been incarnating there ever since, you guys got to pull it together, because now it's time, and you need to build these technologies, and you need to actually initiate these transitions yourself towards a planetary culture. And as soon as you take those leaps, we're going to be right there with you. And it's just like Gene Roddenberry, you know, he had a really brilliant vision when he wrote the story of First Contact into Star Trek. And I always knew there was this like beautiful hint of truth. But in First Contact, you know, what happens is the humans figure out, you know, this kind of like drunk, gruffy, you know, scientist guy figures out warp drive. And, you know, he sobers himself up and he takes the rocket into space, turns on warp drive. And as soon as he activates warp drive for the first time, the Vulcans come to visit, right? And contact happens. And the Vulcans in this case are kind of like basically a combination of Syrian and Arcturians. They look kind of Syrian, but they've got more like Arcturian culture. Really fascinating kind of translation of the species there. But yeah, we have to actually do it, because then we're on an even playing field. We're acknowledged as equals, and we've really taken responsibility for our own planet, because nobody else can take responsibility of our planet for us.
Mm-hmm. So when you think about mass disclosure, you're saying it starts with us. And that we really need to hone in on some of those skills that maybe we forgot: telepathy, discernment, and how we're functioning within this vessel that we came to Earth in our human suit, right? So I think when it comes to when mass disclosure, for an answer to Andrea's question, I don't think that you're actually giving us a time frame. You're saying it's up to us. So we're co-creating it in the moment, right? With every moment.
Yeah. I mean, my goal is, you know, Musk says Mars by 2030. I say like Alpha Centauri or the Pleiades by 2030. And that's because I'm not interested in building rockets and getting us onto Mars, which is like a dead, lifeless world that had its period of life. I'm interested in us communing with the rest of the galactic species out there. And that means actually getting real about superluminal travel, right? It's the reason why my company is called Superluminal Systems. This is a huge area of my research and my work. Mm-hmm. And we have to get real about resource allocation, which means understanding replication systems, understanding duplicating matter. You know, again, Gene Roddenberry there, another brilliant insight, the idea that, you know, if once humans develop the ability to reproduce matter, what he calls the replicator, you know, in those films, and I still think that's probably the best term for it, suddenly there's no need for an economic system the way we know it anymore. Because there is, gold backing ended a long time ago, but, gold is still extremely valuable because it's rare and it's this like valuable object, right? But if you can generate as much gold as you want in a replicator, right, you can molecularly reproduce that same structure, then what value does it have? It's not about the thing anymore. It's about how it's used. And then it's not about, objects and resources being worth money anymore. It's actually all about the art and the consciousness and the creation of something. So for example, you could, I like to use the analogy of a cup of coffee, right? You could always like replicate a cup of coffee and get a cup of coffee, but it's not about that. It's actually about the value of the coffee. In other words, it's about the person who grew those beans and roasted those beans and ground them down just right. And, milked that goat, and frothed that milk just right and added that local sugar or honey or whatever and made that particular cappuccino. Like that art is something that can be passed. And each and every person is an artist. Everyone has gifts, right? And there's no reason not to value those gifts. We can give away tons of our art and we can highly value a lot of our art and use that in order to get recognition and value exchange and to create economy, right, between us and connection between us. And this is really the nature of a future economic system, is where economics are based on trust. They're based on how much you're sharing the gifts that you give, how well you're valuing yourself, how much leadership and stewardship you take over situations that are happening in your life and in the world and in your community. All of these are markers of value in a future economy, not just how much money you have in the bank and, like whether you won the lottery or not, or your crypto went crazy or not, or whatever. Like that means nothing really. It all comes down to relationship.
That, I love that you use the analogy of what Gene Roddenberry started with his vision, because Eric Rankin and I on Awakening Code Radio, we've talked about this quite often, about how unusual it was in that time frame when that series was launched, seeing the diversity in the characters. And it could have been portrayed as controversial back then, for sure. And yet what you're seeing is unity consciousness being modeled right then and there, and what is the prime directive? Where are we going with the prime directive? We're being faced with all of that right now. I want to read you a couple more of these questions, because I don't want to run out of time before we answer them. Sure. Gek Benistar asks, have you found any global organizations or platforms as a kind of true United Nations for this new era to create New Earth?
Yeah. So, the issue with just saying there's an organization or a platform is that, in my experience, I think people are kind of tired of the umbrella concept, right? Like, so the trouble with creating a unified coalition of organizations, which, believe me, I've been working on that for a very long time. I'm co-founder of Unify back in 2012. We've been trying to bring together organizations. We've had many iterations where we tried to unify all the projects under kind of one brand or one name. And the problem is it just like people's egos get in the way a lot, right? Because people want to have their own brand. They want to have their own name for it, whether that's, the New Earth Nation or the, Earth Sovereignty Corps or the whatever, everybody's, or Unify even, or Uplift or whatever, like everybody's got a brand, everybody's got a name, everybody's got a flag, right? And yeah, as Chris said, it's variety is the spice of life, right? So it's beautiful that we all have these different flags that we organize under. Now, the real key is not just being individual organizations, but being organizations in connection and coordination with each other, right?
I,
So
I,
it's
I feel like what you're talking about is exactly what Portal to Ascension and Disclosure Fest and Unify are all doing right now.
yeah.
Weaving together and showing that we're uplifting each other by all of us coming together, setting
That's
our
right.
egos aside,
That's right.
and really knowing that whatever we're co-creating right now is going into the unified field and
That's right.
helping to uplift what's happening rather than focusing on the things that weigh us down. And
Right.
so many of our speakers are now really sprouting this kind of information because we're watching what's happening around us going, wait. Let's not focus on all the negativity we're seeing. Let's focus on how we can work together side by side, no hierarchy, no egotistical structure. And, we're still in the human skin. So we're still working on our own evolution as an individualized being,
Yeah.
but at the same time being part of the whole. I'm so glad you
That's
brought
right.
that up.
That's
Really
right.
important concept. So that's a
Yeah.
great answer for that. No one organization, many organizations that are working together collaboratively.
That's right. And I want to speak a little bit to his follow-up question in the chat too, which would be the communication protocol. So like how do these organizations commune and connect? Well, this is the next big project, right? Because here's the thing is, we all these organizations, they all have social media accounts, right? Across a variety of different networks. The identity is fragmented across each of them. The audiences are different across each of them. And every one of those social media networks pretty much all basically are built on a business model which thrives by throttling posts from the people that are on that platform in order to force them to pay for marketing. And this is just the game, right? Because it's like the business of Facebook, for example, their business model is, two big things. One is they make money by selling your data, like giving analytics to certain groups and people and whatever. And now not as much that business model because they got really reamed, by Congress. And now Congress is like, no, you got to give people their data back. You got to be real explicit. But everybody has had the experience of being on a Facebook product and just being on a phone call and then opening up Instagram or opening up Facebook afterwards. And guess what? They're marketing right to you based on what you said in your private conversation, right?
Yeah. Within
So
30
your
seconds
data
sometimes. Yeah.
is being used to be sold that way. And then you have this other business model that says, oh, well, we need to make money through people marketing. Well, what's the best way for us to do that? Oh, I know. Let's keep them from actually reaching their audience of followers, and then they'll pay us to reach that audience. Right now it costs, I think the last time I checked, it was like around 125. No, it was right around $200, 225 to reach 5 to 10% of the followers that we have in Unify. So even though we've got, 1.8 million followers or whatever, to reach 5 to 10% of those costs $125 for one post, right?
Oh.
This is the arm twisting that Facebook has done and has set us up in. And so we can't actually use the social networking platforms that we're on right now to globally coordinate in an effective manner, especially when we're talking about communicating to millions of people simultaneously and aggregating movements between millions of people. Television is actually a better mechanism because there's not throttling. If everybody's tuned into a channel, they're on that channel, right? But we can go way beyond that. And so a lot of different groups and organizations and a lot of my partners, we've been building the infrastructure for a distributed data-based web where information can actually move peer-to-peer, the way the internet was actually originally designed, but that we also have the kind of cloud backing that we need in order to ensure that our data stays intact, right? So if we turn off our computer, we don't just suddenly disappear to the rest of the world, that there's a persistence, but that we're in control of that data, that we command it, and that when we have connections, those connections are direct and true and directly peer-to-peer, and no one can ever get in the way of you reaching your network again. You could think of it kind of like email, right? Except for that email has been so botched and so spam overloaded and so marketing content overloaded, we can't even use it as a mechanism anymore. And yet email is a beautiful, example of a peer-to-peer network. Like if you have people's email addresses, you can email them, right? Like you can actually reach them. But of course, when it comes to, the kind of marketing overload, all of a sudden now we have problems. So there's a reconditioning of the communication network on Earth that's occurring. And what me and my team are doing with Core Network is building a dashboard for that. So we're building this kind of system that you see behind me here, a global planetary dashboard that we can use to interoperate with these different networks, communicate with each other, and do it the way that it should be done as a galactic species, not just as a planetary species. So all of the favorite interfaces and badass technology that you've seen in superhero movies for the past 10, 15, 20 years, all of that is becoming real. So you guys are going to have to be patient for it, though, because it's a big project and there's a lot of infrastructure being built at the same time. So when it comes, it's going to come fast, but don't expect anything for at least another 6 to 12 months. And there's a big process and a big movement happening right now, but it's coming. And what this is really about is it's about freeing the communication systems of Earth. Because if we can truly free our communication systems, then we can connect, we can collaborate, and we can coordinate to develop the Earth that we're all envisioning inside.
That's a great visual for all of us to hold. And to keep that intention in our feeling bodies, in our emotional bodies, and pulsing that out, that we're holding that vision with you and supporting you on that mission for our Core Network. I see that, people are asking, can we join already? And I know that was a great way to let people know that it's a massive undertaking that you're doing. And there's a lot of sensitivity there, to keeping things pristine and in a beautiful container. And I ask all of our viewers if we can all hold that vision with Adam, that we're putting this project in a beautiful crystalline container so that it's protected and it's being energized by all the people who want to see this new way of communicating, where we all feel uplifted, seen, heard, felt, and held in our highest selves, where all of us feel that we're coming from a protected state, where we feel safe. I think that's a big element of what a lot of people are feeling lately, is that wonkiness in the field with our communication. So that was beautifully put. Thank you for that, Adam. I see somebody else writing in. I'm in the Q&A section, so I'm trying to answer the Q&As. And then there's a bunch of people writing in the chat as well. There was a YouTube viewer, Jonathan Smith. He's asking, what is a Merkaba and how is it used?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. So your energy body has many different layers to it, right? So you can understand if working out from the center, I think Barbara Ann Brennan does a great model of sort of illustrating this, but a good approach is to understand you have your core star, right? Which is like central network, the singularity point where the you becomes all and the all becomes you, and the infinite eternal kind of linkage is ever present if you're moving from that space of deepest sort of soul calling or core star calling. And then you have the next layer of your field, which is where you have a vertical pillar that runs through your body, and you have a series of dantians, right? Mm-hmm. And those dantians, there's 3 primary ones in your system, and you have a bunch of minor ones. So you have a lower dantian, a central dantian in your heart space, and an upper dantian in your third eye, also sometimes called like the Om point, for example. Mm-hmm. And there's a few like minor points above the heart. There's a point that's known as the soul seat, but it's more kind of like If you imagine the heart as a torus system, it's the place of the gate that goes in the top, and you can write it in. And Drunvala Melchizedek does a great job of describing a heart meditation where you kind of ride that little wave to get into that heart center point, and then ride that all the way into the core star point. So this layer with the Dantians is often called the haric fields, right? Because the hara is this central pillar through which your energy system operates. And then beyond that, you have generally what's known as kind of the chakric layers, right? And the chakric layers is where you have your root chakra, which is like literally a vortice coming out from your perineum down out of your body. Sacral chakra, which is a vortice in the front and the back around your lower pelvis. Solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, and crown coming in through the top. And each of your chakras acts as like a fractal harmonic organizing system. Okay, so it's important to explain that piece a little bit in order to really understand the Merkaba, because what you're doing in your body is you are always, and when I say body, I mean not just physical, but all of your bodies, and what you are is you're actually interfacing with different geometric and harmonic, meaning color vibration or sound vibration, layers of space-time, right? So I'm plugging myself in to the physical experience of reality through the geometry of my root chakra. It's literally regulating the physical experience I have. So if I'm hot or if I'm cold, the key is to actually work with my root chakra. And by changing the harmonic vibration of my root, I can change the physiological experience that I'm having throughout my entire body. This is why for ancient cultures that were deeply focused on root chakra communion, so to speak, with the divine, right? They used fire, air, earth, water, and spirit, elementals, right? The 5 and the pentagram, which is very connected to the root, in order to operate and in order to connect with that system, right? And so each chakra plays this role in regulating. So root is physical, sacral is emotional, solar is mental, heart is interpersonal, and then the upper chakras deal more with our collective interface with others. So we have collective physical, collective emotional, and collective mental. And because of that, there's a ratcheting that occurs between the throat and the root, my inward physical experience, and my shared physical communion or communication experience with others, right? Or sacral, my individual emotional experience or energetic experience, and my shared energetic experience, my empathy, right? My shared field with others. Now, the Merkaba is a structure that's generally seen as 2 tetrahedrons interpenetrating each other, forming a star tetrahedron-like formula in which each tetrahedron is spinning in opposite directions. Well, inside of our energetic system, the chakric system and the haric system interact through this sort of hexagonal geometry intersection. And when I say hexagonal, I mean upward triangle and downward triangle, right? Or upward tetrahedron and downward tetrahedron. There's a balancing operation that's occurring through the sacral, which is a 6-petal lotus, the heart, which is a 12-petal lotus or 6-6, and the third eye, which is an 18-petal lotus or 6-6-6. Interesting on that one, huh?
Yeah.
And also it's generally seen as 2 petals, right? And the 2 petals is 9 and 9. And then 9 and 9 form the yin and the yang, right? We look at the number 9, it looks like a yin yang, or 69 is like a yin yang, right? But it's a 9 and a 9, but it's 9 for the infinite yin and 9 for the infinite yang. But it's made of 3 6s, right? And so you have this individual orientation, a collective, interpersonal, shared orientation, like in your heart, when you feel someone, it's simultaneous and you're both feeling and experiencing as if it's you at the same time. And then third eye, which is like, I'm feeling me, you're feeling you, and I can see what you're feeling and what I'm feeling, and I'm able to discern and differentiate between the two, right? So these are the main operator locations, and they also rest over those haric line dantians. And so these are the piloting systems for the spin of this larger field that we call the Merkaba. So by actually connecting to each of these three pillars, you're linking the upper sort of vertical ray coming through your field with the lower vertical ray that's going upward. And you're establishing through the mind positioning within that ray field. You can think of it as a cone, but we're establishing positioning, which we're triangulating in order to let our triangulated, chakra systems operate those triangles. And we spin this upward triangle and we spin this lower triangle. And as we spin it and it reaches different harmonic states, it changes the way that our entire field and our consciousness are operating with the surrounding space-time. And so when you get it spinning at the right kind of rates, and as I experienced back in 2005, my first extremely powerful astral travel experience where I literally portaled out of my body and shot through a stargate and met all of these beings from around the galaxy happened because I was literally running across the desert and spinning up my Merkaba, and I got it spinning to this point where it was like every part of my system came into high level harmonic communion, and all of a sudden I was able to just like shoot out of my body. And then I was able to sustain that connection so that when I was brought back down into my body, I was both experiencing myself standing on the ground in the desert, as well as being in this astral council chamber and still being able to literally see with my physical eyes the beings that I was communing with from all over the galaxy. And so it's like the Merkaba is designed in a way to help you bridge higher level, operations in your field with lower level operations. So your physical body and emotional and mental body can more easily interact with collective bodies and astral fields, spiritual causal templates, catheric template, et cetera, et cetera.
That was the best explanation I have ever heard. Seriously, like a lot of people talk about this, but the way that you language that, I think we all really got a visual. I see Sparkling Light is writing, wow, a most excellent explanation. Adam, absolutely amazing. People are really writing in and connecting and also putting links to your some YouTubes of you.
Thanks,
so
you guys. Really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much to all of our viewers here. I'm seeing 222 on my computer, 1222 here in California, and we wanted to wrap up by 1225. So there's so much more. You are so multifaceted. There's so much more we could have gotten into, but why don't we end with how people can find you? Or maybe give one more little message about, because we didn't really talk about that discernment meter that you and I talked about yesterday. That was so important to us yesterday while we were talking about, our feeling body and how to exercise that muscle inside of us with everything that's going on right now. How do we bring it back to self?
Yeah, well, it's a deep one, and we didn't go there, but it's a topic that really deserves, I think, more time than we have right now. I'll just speak really briefly to it and say that in the stages of our opening and awakening, the first stage is really about breaking out of the conditioning that we've been in before, which requires us to be extremely open and start receiving information from all kinds of sources, right? And that often means that we're just taking in the deluge, right? And the deluge of all of the stuff that's being shared out there, to be honest, we're still in a situation where there's a lot of truth being shared from a lot of fronts and a lot of people that have direct, real experiences that are happy to share about their own experiences and are happy to admit their faults and their weaknesses and their challenges, and that really shows us more about who they are as people. It lets us trust them. And then there's a lot of stuff that's coming in that doesn't have that accountability. Right? It's anonymous. It's hidden behind a field. You don't know exactly where it came from, but some secret information has some secret bit of truth for you. And when it doesn't have that accountability and it doesn't have the backing, and you can't actually line up the pieces, it's a lot more tricky to just say, oh, well, all of that must be true, because it's challenging the things that I've challenged when I woke up. And this is where that big opening process needs to start kind of coming in. And we need to start actually building better discernment and boundary conditions around how we test information and we test truth, right? Because you got to fact check, right? You got to test things, because I promise you, like, the stuff that's really true out there is true across the board. In other words, the truth is self-evident. It's self-referential. It shows up everywhere and everything. And I mean that not as like, if you think something's true and you Google it, if you see a bunch of websites that say the same thing, that does not mean it's true. Because as we learned from Cambridge Analytica, there's a ton of operations that were put in place quite a while ago where they realized, oh yeah, all you have to do is say one thing, and then you make a bunch of fake websites and blogs that validate that thing, and people are going to believe it. Well, we're in a landscape right now where disinformation is at an all-time high. So you need to really take things with salt, and that means with groundedness, right? Being anchored in the earth, anchored in yourself, and really weigh things out and test the truth. See how it feels. Does it actually bring us closer to communion and connection with each other? Or does it make us more hateful? Does it make us more spiteful? If somebody challenges something that you're following or you believe, do you attack them back and say that they're, bad or evil, or they're part of the cabal just because they have a different idea? Well, if you are, you're actually playing into the very game that the disinformation campaigns are designed around creating, which is creating that kind of disconnection and distrust, and so it's really important that we sit with it and we listen to other perspectives, we listen to other ideas, and we really consider where people are coming from, and their direct experience and their lineage. So that's all I'll say on that. If you guys want to catch me, if you want to catch me some more this weekend, I actually have a live session going on tomorrow. I'm on Bardcast with Alan Green. I'll pop a link in the chat for you guys. But that starts at 2 p.m. Mountain Time, 1 p.m. Pacific Time. And Alan Green is absolutely brilliant. He's decoded the work of Shakespeare, found that it's all encrypted, found that the Great Pyramid of Giza's mathematics are hidden inside of it, and there's so many interconnections between our work, and we're gonna just have a blast. And it's gonna be several hours of humor and ridiculousness between Alan Green and I downloading the truth of the universe. And then tomorrow after Bardcast, I'm back here on Portal to Ascension, on a panel with Grant Cameron and JJ and Desiree Hertak, two of my heroes. I have the Keys of Enoch in this lab here, and it's one of my most precious books. And I believe that panel starts at 5:20 p.m. tomorrow. 620 Mountain is where I'm at. So I hope you guys come and check me out tomorrow. Come join. We're going to have a great time. And you can find me on Bardcast at Bardcast on Facebook if you search for events. And it's a live stream there.